Good afternoon, and welcome to the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. I call this meeting to order on July 11th, 7/11. At the time now is 1:16 p.m. Before I begin, I would like to do a roll call, starting with myself, and then I will go to my left. My name is Harry Spikes. I'm the chairman of the board.
Eric Holcomb, Executive Director.
Sarah Langmead, Commissioner.
Jill Dennis, Commissioner.
Gary Rodwell, Commissioner, representing the Coppin Heights Community Development Neighborhood and Baltimore Heritage.
I'm Ann Powell, and I am
And now you now have
Commissioner representing Greater Baltimore Committee.
Nicole Battle, Commissioner representing Affordable Housing Developers.
Tamara Woods, Commissioner representing DHCD.
Peter Morrill, Commissioner.
Garrett Power, Commissioner, representing the Baltimore Historical Society.
John Bullock, City Council Representative to the Commission.
Catherine Good, Commissioner.
CHAP staff.
Stacey Montgomery, CHAP staff.
Lauren Chiswick, CHAP staff.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to all who are in attendance with us today. The CHAP mission is to ensure and promote the culture and economy of Baltimore through the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, and neighborhoods that have aesthetic, historic, and architectural value. The goals of CHAP include preserving historic architecture and monuments, reclaiming broken neighborhoods, preventing demolition by neglect, and integrating our city's past with its future. We have a few housekeeping items. So for those of you who came here today, outside we have an agenda. That agenda has a list of all of the topics that we will be talking about today. For those of you who wish to speak on those topics, please feel free to sign in and speak. So you can speak. The sheets look like this. If you have not signed the sheets and you want to speak, please feel free to let us know, and the CHAP staff will give you the sheets so you can sign up. Here's a couple ground rules. We usually give people 3 minutes to speak, right? When the 2-minute and 30 seconds warning comes up, I just do this. I do not throw it down. But when you see it, that means you have 30 seconds left. We ask a couple of things that you do. If you have a cell phone, which most of us do, please make sure that you put it on vibrate. Number 2, if you have a conversation that you need to take care of amongst each other, please leave the room. We have mics that are very powerful. And when folks are speaking, including our staff and the commissioners, it can be picked up on the mic. So particularly if you have private conversations. And finally, please enjoy the hearing. Minutes. I would like to make a motion to waive the reading of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any corrections or additions need to be made to the new minutes?
I am abstaining as I was not present at the last meeting.
Thank you, Catherine. And finally, I would like to make a motion to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Minor applications, due process and review procedures. CHAP reviews applications in conjunction with the building permit process of the permit section of the Department of Housing and Community Development. If a building application is filed prior to historic design review, the application is placed on hold pending completion of the CHAP review process. The review process is completed by issuing an authorization to proceed. The historic design review process is in addition to other applicable laws and regulations and does not diminish the force of urban renewal plans, building codes, zoning codes, etc. It is the applicant's responsibility to comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and codes. Proposed projects are reviewed prior to issuing a building permit. Applicants must comply with the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in planning and executing their projects. Design review considers the proposed work taking into consideration the historical and architectural character of the structure and the immediate area. Applicants will need to clearly explain how their project complies with the design guidelines. Minor projects. In order to expedite the application process, the Commission has delegated review authority to the Executive Director for cases involving minor work. Minor projects must not significantly change the overall appearance or remove the significant undamaged historic fabric. Major projects. Major projects may change the overall character, appearance, and integrity of the structure. Substantial building alterations, demolitions, additions, and new constructions are considered more projects and are reviewed at public hearing. Interested parties should request a pre-development meeting in the planning development to design the review process. An electronic version of all materials must be submitted to the CHAP staff at least 25 calendar days prior to the public hearing date. If the application is complete, the project shall be scheduled for a public hearing. CHAP hearings. At the public hearing, CHAP staff presents recommendations to the commission regarding the project. Following the staff presentation, the application may make a presentation to the commission. Interested parties, including neighborhood associations, have the opportunity to provide public testimony. Following testimony, the commission renders a decision on the application at the public hearing. Persons aggrieved by the decision of the commission may seek judicial and appellate review in accordance with the Baltimore City Code. After an authorization to proceed is issued, the applicant may obtain a building permit. The commission's process is impartial, and staff's comments are evidence that assists the commission in rendering decisions. I would like to ask for a motion to approve the final agenda. So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Let us begin. On our agenda today, we have the consent agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to read all the items on the consent agenda? Okay. Do I have a, I would like to put a motion on the floor to waive the items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Our regular agenda. Number one on our list is 249 Asquith Street, Eastern Female High School, Baltimore City landmark. Request concept review, construction, a 4-story side and rear addition. Applicants, Henson Development, Mission First Housing, PIKL Studio LLC. The staff is Lauren.
Thank you, Commission. Today I have to present to you this proposal. First, a little bit of background. Eastern Female High School is located at 249 Asquith Street at the southeast corner of Asquith and Orleans. And you can see on this map here, it's marked with a yellow star, and local historic districts are shown in blue and landmarks are shown in green dots, just to orient you a little bit. It's worth noting, this is the first time I've come across this, that due to various lot consolidations and subdivisions that have occurred since the landmark designation, neither the landmark designation boundaries nor the surveyed property boundaries align with the parcel boundaries for the address of 249 Asquith. So you can see here that the landmark boundaries are in blue and the legal parcel boundaries are in red. And then comparing that to the property boundaries as surveyed based on the meets and bounds on the deed are in green. So these discrepancies will not impact CHAP review as the landmark designation footprint is larger than the project boundaries, but I just wanted to point this out because if you're looking at sort of the different maps and saying these dimensions seem to be different, you are correct. They are different. But again, it's not going to be an issue for the commission's review. Just going to go over a few aerial photos. This is a view of the roof. This is an aerial view from the west, looking towards the facade on Asquith. This is a view from the north, fronting on Orleans, and a view from the south. And then this is a view from the east. You can see this is the 1880 Sanborn Fire Insurance map. You'll see that there was a rear portion of the building that is no longer there. It's not advancing. Mm-mm. Okay. Great, thank you. Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps decided to make it fun and change the orientation. So instead of looking north, we're looking east. This is the 1890 Sanborn map. And you'll see that, it was located at the corner of Asquith and Orleans, but there actually was another property located between the building and Orleans Street, and historically, that was actually in alignment with the building. So I think that is important because it fits into staff's recommendations regarding the proposal. You can see that the property to the north was then removed around 1890, and so the school building had sort of a little more room to breathe. Throughout the 20th century, it was that side of the property was used to house, temporary trailers because, of course, our school buildings were oversubscribed. The building description, I'm going to read a little bit from the National Register because they put it very well. The Eastern Female High School was built in 1869 to 1870. It's typical of the Italian villa mode of the late 19th century architecture, as evidenced by its square plan, towers, and bracketing. On the facade, interest is achieved through the vertical lines of the towers, narrow windows and porch columns, broken by the horizontal lines of the stone foundation, balustrade, belt courses, and prominent cornice. It's doing it again. Apologies, commissioners. I'll just keep reading, and then we can go through the images. The most noticeable feature is of the brick western facade is the wooden loggia, which stretches between the towers, and other details which heighten the interest are the triple central windows, pediment, and brick dripstones, which you can see here. And just this photo here is just to show the North Tower. There are some it appears to be original surviving windows on the upper floors. The first floors are removed or inappropriate vinyl windows. Large portions of the cornice are missing. There's a lot of graffiti. This building it retains a lot of its original features, but it's also missing a lot as well. The north and south elevations of the building are sort of low-key variations of that western facade without porches and only one tower in the south. This is the north elevation, north and east elevation, which are very hard to see due to the vegetation. It's a little easier to see what's going on with the elevations from the elevation submitted by the applicants. This is the east elevation, which is the rear of the building, and the north elevation, which historically would not have been, when it was constructed, would not have been visible from a public right-of-way because there was a building adjacent to it. Eastern Female High School was established in 1844 along with the Western Female High School as the two first public schools for white women in Baltimore City. Fun fact, I guess, is that there were, City College had one central location that all of the white boys could walk to, but apparently the more delicate females, there was no way that they could possibly walk to a central location. That's why there was a Western and an Eastern school. This structure was designed by R. Snowden Andrews in 1869-1870. It was designated as a CHAP landmark in 1968 and was legislated as a landmark by Mayor and City Council in 1971. In 1972, the rear of the building was demolished without the knowledge or approval of the commission. This is a photo of the south elevation taken in 1973 that shows a little bit of the eastern portion that had been demolished. And this is the rear elevation after the unapproved demolition. Later in the 1970s, the property was rehabbed and utilized for affordable housing. A little bit of recent history. The city sold the property to Sojourner Douglas College in 2004. The commission reviewed and approved a two-story rear addition to the building, which is going to serve as an educational building for the college in 2014. However, in 2015, the college lost its accreditation, closed, and the building suffered a major fire that created a hole in the roof. The property was sold to the current owners in December 2022, and in April 2023, staff held a pre-development meeting with the owners, and as part of the submission process, CHAP and planning staff reviewed and provided comments on the draft submission of this proposal. The proposal is to rehab the building and convert it into 16 residential units and construct a 4-story addition on the north and east elevations that will contain 36 additional housing units. The proposed addition has a significantly larger footprint than the historic structure and will be attached to the historic building on the north and east elevations through 2 glass hyphens with an internal courtyard on the east elevation of the historic school. There will be parking located to the south of the historic building. The applicants advise that the size of the addition is warranted in order for the project to be financially viable, both in terms of the number of units that will be provided and the costs associated with rehabilitating the severely deteriorated historic building. This shows the proposed massing as viewed from sort of the southwest, sort of showing the relationship between the proposed massing of the addition and the historic building. And you can see that the gray squares that sort of project up, those are elevator towers. Because of course, accessibility is important and there is no accessibility in the existing historic building. And so, that needs to be provided. This is the proposed first floor footprint. So you can see that the main entrance proposed is actually on Asquith, but it's not at the historic entrance. It is north of the main entrance, accessible from Asquith and Orleans Street through the glass hyphen, very similar to a previous proposal that the commission reviewed for the Upton Mansion. But you can see that the main entrance then allows for entrance into the historic building and then also allows accessible access through an elevator, which the historic porch entry could not provide due to the stairs. There's also a separate entrance with an elevator located on the south elevation that connects to the parking lot. This is a floor plan for the second floor, and then the proposed footprint for the basement. And you can see that this is the current view of this corner of Asquith and Orleans, and this is the proposed massing. So you can see how the new addition sort of wraps around the corner, but still allows for the historic building, that tower, to be the most prominent feature on that corner. And here's the current south elevation, which I might add, I took that photo through a fence. So in order to get the best view, you can't see this view from the south unless you stick your phone through a fence. And then this is the proposed massing for the south elevation. So again, showing that the addition is set. You can kind of see the sliver, just because of the perspective, the sliver of the glass hyphen connecting the new proposed addition to the south elevation. And these are going to be sort of the two elevations, the historic elevations that will engage with the addition. The other elevations will just show the addition fully, and you won't see the historic building. CHAP staff applied sections of the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in reviewing this proposal. 1.7, alterations and additions. Staff finds that the concept proposal shows a retention of historic features on the historic building. The proposed addition, while possessing a larger footprint than the Eastern Female High School, is compatible with the historic building in massing, height, form, and scale. Because the addition wraps around the building on 2 sides, only one of which is highly visible from a public right-of-way, which is Orleans Street, the overall size of the addition won't be that obvious from a public right-of-way. The addition is located on secondary elevations, and staff finds that the proposal meets this design guideline. Of course, noting that as the submitted plans are largely conceptual with no architectural details, fenestration, et cetera, there are bullets of this guideline that staff can't comment on at this point. Staff also applied 2.1 guiding principles for new design. And staff finds that the proposal as submitted is very schematic, and thus staff can only assess appropriateness of massing and location of the proposed addition. But staff finds that the proposed addition is appropriate in height, scale, and setback in terms of the historic building and the streetscape. 2.2, site design. Staff finds that the proposal meets the design guideline. Although the addition will be visible from the primary elevation, the addition is set back from that elevation so that the corner tower of the school is the most prominent feature on the corner of the lot. And again, it's important to note that when this building, when the school was built, there was an adjacent building located to the north of the school fronting on Asquith Street, and so that entire elevation wasn't visible. Staff sort of takes into consideration that original context and finds that it is appropriate for the addition to be present and highly visible on that northern portion of the site because that north elevation was not originally designed to be seen. The primary entrance for the building is proposed to be at the hyphen at the north side instead of the existing historic entrance through the elevated portico on Asquith Street. And the use of the hyphen as a primary entrance allows for full accessibility to the building, which would not be feasible up those historic stairs. Staff also applied 2.3 scale and form. And staff finds that the conceptual approval meets the design guideline. The scale is compatible with the school. The roof on the addition is flat. And while that flat roof doesn't replicate the low sloped roof line of the school, it's compatible and helps a sizable addition be visually subservient. And the other bullet points in this application, or in this guideline will be addressed in a future submission. Staff also considered archaeological potential on this site and has determined that there has been a significant amount of subsurface disturbance on the site, particularly during the demolition of the reapportioned school in 1972. And staff believes that there is low potential for intact archaeological deposits within the limit of disturbance for this specific project. Neighborhood comments. This property is a Baltimore City landmark and thus does not have a neighborhood architectural review committee. As staff stated in the briefing, staff, both CHAP and planning staff, typically does reach out to the surrounding neighborhood and community associations. That did not happen this month due to several factors. However, staff does understand that the developer, the development team has done a significant amount of outreach to the community and surrounding community associations as a part of this project. So if the commission has any concerns about that, I'm sure that the developer can speak to that so that the commission can determine whether or not it's appropriate to table the vote or if it's appropriate to move forward with the vote today. Staff believes that this proposed addition, while larger than the historic school, meets the CHAP design guidelines on height, massing, and scale due to its design and siting. And staff recommends concept approval with the final details to be reviewed and approved by the commission. Thank you, commissioners. Any questions for me?
We have one line.
Yes.
I guess two procedure questions. One is, do we as CHAP or CHAP staff need to do anything to update or modify the boundary so that it matches the parcel boundary? I'm not sure we do. I'm just putting it out there. And then the second question is procedural, which is it permissible if we elect to vote today that we can frame it in such a way that it's pending community input, or how would that work if we wanted to proceed that way?
I mean, I don't want to address the procedure. I don't know about that procedural question, but I do think that, as part of this process, it is an iterative process, and there certainly will be opportunities and requirements for there to be community engagement and outreach as this project moves forward. So I think that in this case, this is a very schematic design, and I think that there's going to be ample opportunity for community engagement as the design moves forward.
Lauren, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Lauren?
No, Just a comment, and
Yes, sir.
that is that based upon the final details being reviewed and approved by the commission, it seems that there will be an additional time and opportunity for you all to engage the community.
Yes, absolutely. There would be, I'm sure that the development team would prefer to have one more CHAP hearing, but depending on how this project moves forward, potentially there may be a second concept hearing. You know, I don't think we want to be as efficient with everyone's time as possible, but there's certainly, staff is recommending that there will absolutely be, if the commission agrees, another commission hearing for this. But in the interim, there would be engagement and outreach with the community on this design and development proposal prior to it coming back to the commission for further review.
Okay, hold on a second. Anyone else? Kathy, go right ahead.
All right, sorry, one more question. Could you go back to one of the Sanborn maps, please?
Which one?
The Sanborn, yeah, just keep clicking. The second Sanborn map that was white, not the pink one. No, she hadn't passed it.
It was before these.
Sorry, bunch of clicking. There, that works.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so my question is, it looks, if I'm understanding right, the current parcel boundary kind of does this little jog here and then kind of goes straight across like that, or is it
No.
here,
The-
or somewhere?
No, the current parcel boundary, it appears to me, is where that part of it is the line between the primary school and the Eastern Female School. Yeah.
This here,
And then it jogs
kinda
north.
jogs
It jogs north a little
that
bit.
way,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of does that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was just trying to relate the two.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, so that, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm looking at our sheet, and we do not have anyone on the list to come up and testify, give witness, but would the designer, architect like to come up and speak, or? By all means. And give your full name. Yes, ma'am.
Pavlina Ilieva, principal with PIKL Studio.
Nice to meet
Good
you.
afternoon.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the architect? Come on, go right ahead.
I have one question, and I'm not actually sure if it's for you or the developer, but it's regarding community outreach. I understand we have a question or, a decision point before us on whether to table a vote or not because of notification, but our understanding is there has been some level of outreach done regarding this particular project. Can you describe what has been done?
I'll defer the question, if I may, to our development team who are more familiar with it. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for having us today. I'm Dana Henson, Principal with the Henson Development Company. So in terms of outreach, we are part of a larger development, Perkins, Somerset, and Old Town. And we're the developers that are actually developing the Somerset and Old Town parcels. And this parcel we consider an extension of those projects. Our most recent scheduled meetings to discuss this parcel in particular were canceled due to the air quality, ironically. Both meeting dates were canceled, so we have not been able to go over the project in detail with them. And also to engage with the Pleasant View community. The meeting was scheduled at the Pleasant View Community Association, their building, which this property is immediately adjacent to, only separated by the parking lot. So we're hoping to get that rescheduled. We work directly with the Housing Authority and the city, DHCD, in scheduling those meetings. So we will look to schedule that soon. We, as it was discussed earlier, will have other meetings with the community, and probably when we meet with them, we'll be further along than the schematic design to show them our intentions and kind of where we are, because we are actually moving the project fairly quickly with our design team on what the project will look like for them. So, but again, we have been working with this particular community since 2014 as it relates to the Somerset and Old Town properties that we're working on. So we have a close relationship with a lot of the community associations and representatives on our activities in this community. So we'll just continue along that line, just adding the Pleasant View residents to our pool of people that we meet with to discuss it in more detail.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Commissioner, any other questions? Thank you so much. Nice. Lauren, could you take us back to the recommendation page? Thank you. So we, for discussion before we have a vote, commissioners, we have the recommendation in front of us. Is there any further discussion that you all would like to have amongst one another? Yes, sir.
Only thing I would say is just given what we've just heard in terms of the architect and the developer, that there's ongoing conversations, and I know they're going to come back to us in terms of some of the final details. I'm comfortable with the staff's recommended.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Any other commissioners, any other comments?
I agree.
Thank you.
I would echo that.
All right.
I would move to accept staff's recommendation.
All right, let's do
Second.
it. The motion's on the floor. So who seconded?
Second, Sarah.
Sarah, thank you, Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Should we note for the record that Commissioner Capaldi stepped out, was
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
absent for the discussion of
Yes.
this from his firm?
Thank you. Let the record reflect. Thank you, Sarah. Next on our agenda, we have 114 West Lexington Street, 116 through 120 West Lexington Street, 207 through 209 Park Avenue, 5 and Dime Historic District. Request demolition, hearing 1, determination of architectural significance. The applicant is Chooks. I do not want to say the last name wrong.
Okoro.
Say it again.
Okoro.
Okoro. And the staff is Stacy. Okay.
All right, good afternoon, everybody.
Good
So
afternoon.
yes, we have a demolition hearing 1, determination of architectural significance for these properties. They're all separate properties, but they're being developed as one parcel. Again, this is just like the other project we looked at where there's 3 properties. They're part of one LDA and they're being developed together. So the demolition request is for all 3 properties together. All right, so let's look at the site. So this is situated within the 5 and Dime Historic District, which is located in the historic retail core of Baltimore City. It demonstrates the distinctive characteristics of 19th and early 20th century commercial architecture in a variety of styles. 5 and Dime comprises about 5 city blocks northwest of the Inner Harbor and immediately west of the Central Business District. Howard Street continues to serve this area as the primary thoroughfare for public transit, since light rail tracks replaced the streetcar route here. But we're over on Lexington and Park Avenue. We'll get a little bit. This is showing the property, the 3 parcels that we're looking at together in the district. Here's an aerial view of the site in the district. And here's an overview, an aerial view closer up showing the properties as identified here. And then this is looking north, sort of aerial looking north, looking east, looking south, and looking west. And this is the corner, this is Park and Lexington, the corner here. Okay. All right, so we'll just start with describing each of the buildings here. This is 114 West Lexington Street. It's a 3-story brick building with a projecting 2-story metal bay window over a boarded storefront. The building was constructed in the late 19th century and served as the entry to a theater for many years. This building is 116 to 120 West Lexington Street. It's a 4-story modern style building that is covered in both flat and undulating masonry. The storefront is also boarded on the 1st story. There are no windows on the upper story of any portion of the building, no windows, no doors. It's either flat or undulating masonry. And it was constructed, this building itself was constructed in 1941 for the Ann Lewis Shops, which is a small women's clothing store that existed at the time. And then this is 207 to 209 Park Avenue. It's a 4-story orange spot iron brick building with a 3-story metal window with decorative metal windows and a denseled brick cornice. The building was constructed around 1900 and has been home to a variety of small businesses. It's a really small, it's not a very deep building compared to other buildings in the district. All right. So the background on this is both to the larger west side and then bringing it down to this property and how we got to the Five and Dime Historic District. We've talked about this property, or this, how we came from, if people are familiar with the redevelopment plan for the west side, and then how we got to the Five and Dime Historic District. So in 1998, there was a plan for the redevelopment of the west side, which led to, in 2000, the creation of the Market Center National Register Historic District. Notably, in that designation, the buildings at 114 West Lexington Street and 207 to 209 Park Avenue were identified as contributing buildings, but the building at 116 to 120 West Lexington Street was identified as non-contributing in that district designation. In 2000, 114 West Lexington Street was sold to the mayor and city council. In 2001, 116 to 120 West Lexington Street was sold to the mayor and city council, and several weeks later, 207 Park Avenue was sold to the mayor and city council of Baltimore. And that same year, in 2001, the Baltimore City and the Maryland Historical Trust entered into what was known as the West Side Memorandum of Agreement. We're going to fast forward many years to 2016 when the MHT approached CHAP and BDC about dissolving the MOA, and in exchange there would be the creation of several districts, local historic districts, which included the Five and Dime and Howard Street commercial districts. And all of the buildings in this application were listed as contributing, or were, I'll say they weren't not listed as contributing buildings, as they were not listed as non-contributing buildings to the historic district, if that sounds kind of backwards. Staff had initially recommended that 116 to 120 West Lexington Street be listed as non-contributing, but a commissioner asked that it be removed from that list. And so they're all considered at this point contributing to the district, or haven't had a motion yet, a formal motion about that. But in September of 2019, the commission reviewed and disapproved a request to paint a mural on the Park Avenue elevation of 116 to 120 West Lexington Street. In 2021, the properties were included in an RFP offered by the Baltimore Development Corporation, and in April of this year, staff met with the applicant to discuss the project and the demolition review process on site. So that's where we are today. The proposal is pretty straightforward. The applicant proposes to demolish these buildings. And today we are looking at specifically just determining if these buildings still contribute to the historic and architectural significance of the district. That's what this hearing one is about. So we'll look at the demolition procedures here today. So this is demolition hearing one, which CHAP staff has applied these rules, which is that the first step in a demolition review is a public hearing to determine if the building or the buildings in this case contribute to the local historic district or continues to meet the standards for designation as a local landmark. This time we'll present those following items that are there: information on the property, the structure, and a determination regarding the significance of all the structure will be made prior to considering details of the demolition and hardship application, any projects for new construction on the site. Doing so allows the commission to determine the importance of the structure solely upon architectural and historical criteria. If the structure does not meet the criteria or contribute to the historic district, then an authorization to proceed for demolition shall be issued. So we've gone through this a couple times, but here we are again. All right, so I'm gonna speak to the history and then I'll go through all of the images if that's all right. So the buildings at the northeast corner of Lexington and Park Avenue represent the diversity of styles and materials that make this district architecturally significant. All the buildings retain significant architectural details that convey their style and period of construction. Just taking some pieces from the Five and Dime Historic District designation, that commercial development began along Baltimore Street in the 18th century. Retail expansion north and west occurred slowly over the early 19th century, reaching a peak between the Civil War and the Second World War. The establishment and growth of Lexington Market, located a block west of the district, drove the development of the city's retail core. All right, so I'm not going to get into all of it, but some of the important things about this, about the retail district that impact this specific area is first that entertainment was also an important part of the historic character of this district. There were lots of theaters and movie houses offering drama and air conditioning. There were several theaters in the district that include the Howard, which is at 113 North Howard Street, the Garden, which is 114 West Lexington that we're looking at now, the Arcadia, the Clown, but the Garden Theater, which is at 114 or was at 114 West Lexington Street, opened in 1915 and provided a large movie theater and a dance hall, which was located actually behind the building, for its patrons. The theater was designed by internationally prominent movie theater architect Thomas W. Lamb, with a large theater downstairs and a dance hall upstairs. The theater cost nearly $1 million to construct and could accommodate 6,000 people, making it one of the largest in the theaters, one of the largest theaters in the city at the time. In 1927, the building was remodeled and renamed Keith's after the new owner, and the theater closed in 1955. The large auditorium and dance hall that was on Clay Street was later demolished, and we'll see images of that in a minute. The other critical thing that happened in this particular part of this district was the institution of Jim Crow-era social laws that limited the rights of African Americans to shop in many of the stores, including the shops along here. By the mid-1920s, most stores had formal policies that in place that excluded people of color, closing existing accounts, and forcing African Americans to travel as far as New York City to do their shopping. The exclusion of African Americans from retail activities was so pervasive that the Afro regularly published a list of stores that held these policies, awarding onions to the stores that did, and orchids to the stores that had more inclusive policies. So in 1945, the Afro did award 116 to 120 West Lexington, the Ann Lewis store, an orchid for having a more inclusive shopping policy. All right. So that was this is the 1890 Sanborn map. You can see that at the corner of Park and Lexington, there are two buildings. One is a 4-story building, one is a 3-story building. That's not the building we're looking at today. We still see that here in the 1901 Sanborn map, but we can see the other buildings are here in 1914. We still see the block is now, but we don't see it until, the 1914 to 1951 Sanborn map shows the current configuration of the buildings. You can also see on 114 West Lexington Street, the little gray projection into Lexington Street is where the marquee for the theater was. And then behind it, overlaid in orange, so 114 West Lexington was the entrance to this very large theater that is up on Clay Street. So it was a very small storefront that took you into a very large theater and dance hall area. All right, so this is an undated photo of the 100 block of West Lexington Street, but we can see the marquee for the Garden Theater, or is that Keith's? That's Keith's. So it's a little bit later on Lexington Street here, but so in the middle is the marquee for that, but you can see next to it is a building that is not the building that is there today. This is another photo. This is looking at Park in Lexington from 1920. And you can see that there are two buildings here that is not the windowless building we see today there. And then here's an image of that very, very, very large projection off of that building for Keith's Theater. Can't miss it. This is another image looking up Park Avenue where we can see, again, that very skinny 4-story building with a large cornice. That building isn't there today. But you can see in the background, and I think interestingly, actually, in the background of this building, you can see 207 to 209 West Lexington Street has something going on the roof above the cornice. There's like a little A, and then right above it, there's something that isn't there now either, and I don't know what happened to that. It's been gone for a long time, I think, because you can't really see it in this image, although it's kind of clipped off. This is just showing a little tiny corner. You can see the Kresge building across the street, but you can see a little bit of the last bit, the Uis of the Ann Lewis shops on the storefront there. Had to look really hard for this, but you can see a little piece of this building from the BGE collection. But here are some other Ann Lewis stores that were built in the mid-20th century in a sort of similar style. All right, so here we, okay. So that's what we have here. So let's talk about staff's opinion on the buildings. So first, this is 114 West Lexington Street. It's a 3-story commercial building with a 2-story projecting bay window on the upper story and a large dentiled cornice. The brick building has a parapet wall that once had metal capping and decorative caps at either end. The 2-story bay window features Beaux Art style molding in the panel between the 2nd and 3rd stories, and the storefront has been boarded. The building was constructed in the late 19th century and featured, as we see, a tall marquee when the building was a theater. The building once served as the opening to a large theater and dance hall behind that, which fronted on Clay. Now we have this building. 116 to 120 West Lexington Street is a commercial building located at the northwest corner of West Lexington Street and Park Avenue. The building faces West Lexington Street and the side elevation fronts on Park Avenue. The modern style 4-story masonry building was constructed in 1941 for the Ann Lewis shops, part of a national chain of women's department stores. 2 other branches in Albany, New York and Richmond, Virginia featured similarly streamlined facades. The building features a 1st-floor storefront on the Lexington Street facade, and the majority of the Park Avenue facade has no fenestration on it. There's no windows and doors on most of Park Avenue. The majority of the Lexington Avenue facade is also blank, but a portion of the elevation features these linear kind of undulations that wrap the Park Avenue corner and continue along the majority of Park Avenue. And then there's a flat, solid wall at the north end on Park Avenue. The commission determined that this building was a contributing property to the 5 and Dime district when it was designated in 2018. However, as I mentioned before, it was listed as non-contributing in the National Register nomination. So some different opinions. Then we have 207 to 209 Park Avenue, which is a 4-story orange iron spot brick building with a 3-story central window that features a pressed metal frame that features panels below the window with a rope design. The building has a Beaux Art style, highly decorative metal cornice topped with dentils and egg and dart trim above the metal band and swags running along it. The 1st-story storefront has been altered with modern glass windows and sort of reddish marble tile above the windows. But the building is also comparatively, it's pretty shallow actually compared to most of their buildings. But here we see it in the 1901, next to it is the picture of a 1901 Sanborn map. It's a very shallow building, but it's maybe some sheet metal manufacturing. It's been a shoe store. All right, so let's talk about the present conditions and the application of the criteria. So first, the criteria. The commission uses the following criteria to evaluate buildings and districts and landmarks. So the quality of significance in Baltimore history, architecture, and archaeology, engineering, and culture is present in districts, sites, buildings, public interior structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and that are associated with one of the following criteria, that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of Baltimore history, or that are associated with the lives of persons significant in Baltimore's past, or that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, et cetera, or that yield or may be likely to yield important information about Baltimore's history or prehistory. So CHAP staff believes that these properties meet 2 of the criteria, criterion 1 and criterion 3. These buildings are significant under criterion 1 for their association with the retail history of Baltimore City, including its early development in the 19th century and events leading to the desegregation that occurred in the middle of the 20th century. And criterion 3, that the buildings at these addresses represent the variety of architectural styles in the commercial district in modestly scaled commercial buildings, including the Beaux-Art and modern styles. The buildings at 114 West Lexington Street and 207 Park Avenue were constructed in the early 1900s when steel frame windows came into popularity for commercial buildings. The building at 116 to 120 West Lexington Street was constructed in 1941 and is simple yet distinctive in design. Staff believes that these buildings possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and therefore retain enough historic fabric to convey the architectural significance. Neighborhood comments, sorry. So we're in the process of establishing an ARC for these districts, which would be the Market Center CDC, but they have no formal comments for this item. Staff did receive an emailed letter of support for the demolition of these buildings from the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore. So the staff recommendation is that the buildings meet criteria 1 and 3 of the commission's criteria for designating districts and landmarks, and that they possess physical integrity. Therefore, staff recommends disapproval of the proposal to demolish these buildings. That's the recommendation.
Stacy, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Stacy? All right, Stacy, thank you. We know that the applicant is here.
Yes.
Would you like to come up and speak?
Sure.
All right.
Got no more I could say though, but thank you, Stacy, for nothing, I suppose. But could you put up the 116, 120?
And Ms. Okoro, if you could you give us your full name?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, forgive me. So Chuk Socorro, so I'm the developer here, and I've worked with CHAP on numerous properties in Baltimore City, historic properties over the years. This is the first one I'm looking to demo. I'm a fan of you guys. You know, usually I support the keeping the buildings alive. So I asked Stacey to bring up 116 because I respectfully disagree with what she's saying about it being a contributing building. And what she did show, I know she showed a little kind of inch clip of supposedly 1941. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Like, you know, you see that, that's like that red arrow is saying something that shows that it contributes to something. But before that, if you go back earlier, there you go. So that's what I'm assuming the building looked like when it was built. So the previous picture, it didn't look like that when it was built. And I did a property on 109 West Lexington that didn't qualify for any historical significance because it was rebuilt, essentially rebuilt somewhere in the 40s or in the 50s. It wasn't really couldn't really pinpoint it, and I'm putting it to the commission that it's similar with this building, the 116, 120. So it's obvious that that building was had a total makeover for whatever reason. So I don't believe it was built in 1941, and I don't believe it's a historic building, essentially. If we go back to what it looks like today, and you know, yeah. So so I just sorry, I have to laugh, but it's it really is an eyesore to what's going on in that area, specifically that road, that street, with the buildings in that street, and what we're trying to do in the street. I haven't. So go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't know.
Up for 3 minutes.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Oh, you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay. Remember, I started late. All right. Okay. All right. So what I like to do. I know I haven't really spoken. A lot of the immediate community, they're commercial guys. I've been working in that community for about 8 years, and I've developed numerous properties. And I've got there's one lady here, sitting back here. I don't know if she would like to say if she's in support of it or what she believes that building is contributes or not to the historic significance. But for now, I'm respectfully asking the Commission to defer on 114 and the Park Avenue, 207 Park Avenue, but basically rule to say that this one could be demoed. That's essentially.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on. Mr. Okoro, come back up real quick.
sorry.
Reason I asked you that because the commissioners may have some questions.
Oh, sorry.
It's
forgive
okay.
me.
Commissioners,
first
any
go.
questions?
Sorry.
Go right ahead.
So, I understand that you don't like the building, but can you describe, that was clear. Can you describe to me why you believe other than you think it should be a non-contributing building, why you believe it should be demolished?
Oh, so in order for it to really have value in the community, be usable, it's going to create. You're going to need a lot of creativity, a lot of money, because like Stacy said, that there's no windows. It's landlocked, so there's no windows in the front, no windows in the back, no windows on the side. And that's on the exterior. The interior is pretty much the same. It's kind of like a hollow shell. So it as a guy who my business model for the last I've been doing this for 19 years in Baltimore City, and my business model has been to turn around historic properties. That's what I've been doing since 2003. I started in Reservoir Hill, Bowen Hill, came down to the west side in 2008. And it's easier to do that for me because I actually enjoy it. I like.
I think that's good, and that's on your website. I think what I'm asking is, what's wrong with this building besides the fact that it doesn't have windows? I mean, is it structurally, is there a lack of integrity?
Well, if the side of the building, I'm not sure if you could see it where you got the graffiti on the right. It's structurally on the first floor. It's kind of suspect, but inside it's had years of water damage. You know, the fire department went in there recently with me, and these guys went on the second floor. They refused to go further up. You know, they were kind of, you know, it is structurally it's poor. My structural engineer has gone in there, and I think he's producing a report for me. But as a seasoned guy, experienced guy, I could go in there and I could see that it's just gonna take a lot of effort and a lot of financial effort to turn it around, and turn it around to what, essentially. And so sometimes, you know, in this is you know, it's economic development, it's a business, and you have to look at, if you're going to have to put in so much money in order to turn it around, and it doesn't warrant it, that
Sure,
financial.
your ROI. Okay, so what about, have you investigated adding windows?
So yes, so it's going to be structurally that it's going to be it's an effort. So everything is doable. You know, you people go to the moon and or whatever, go to space. So that's not an issue, but the issue is whether it's feasible in a speculative way in an upcoming area, and you spending so much effort on a building that it almost, and I don't want to upset anyone here, but it almost doesn't deserve it as such, because, you know, it's been, I know I saw your eyes roll, but you know, I don't know what was, you know, I like to find that architect who decided to transform it to that, you know? So, yeah, so essentially, I have investigated, and I believe in that parcel, it would be best for the community, for all concerned, if we put one building there, and then the building's going to be designed in a way that will celebrate what that area used to be. And so that's my proposal to CHAP, and my proposal to the city, my proposal to the BDC, who actually like that. So it's what I propose to put in its place.
So you focused most of your comments around the corner building there. Yeah, your application still has demolition of the other two buildings in it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's still the plan here.
Yeah. So the Park Avenue building, Stacey mentioned, it's small. There's a forest growing in there. Structurally, all that building is the facade. There's nothing else around it. And it is, I don't know the logic about it because it's just a brick wall in the back. The side that you could see now, I believe that was I'm guessing another building before they did their development on that corridor. But what you see, that's all you see. You see that front. The first floor isn't historic. The commercial first floor facade, and obviously it's got a historic cornice and a historic front. I spoke to my design team about possibly saving that front, but that's something that it's again financially is going to be difficult to do. But so that's the reason why it's been proposed to demo that. That building's attached to that eyesore, the 116, 120. So it just kind of makes sense that it's attached to it, and that was built in the 19th century. So you could see that the 116, 120 was built at the same time. It has to be built at the same time. It wasn't built 1941. We just don't know why they did that. But yeah, so that's essentially that's the reason. It's just a case of, for me, how do I make that block, that area, those parcels a positive picture in the community in that area. And I believe tearing the three of them down and putting something up that has brick facade, it shows that whoever designed it was showing respect to the historical nature of that street, and that's what I'm planning to do, what I'm proposing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more commissioners have any questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, cheers.
We don't have anyone else on our list for public. We have one more, that's right, on our list. Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and I would like to spend my 3 minutes speaking to the integrity of the CHAP process. And the sole question before you today is whether these 3 buildings retain enough of their historic material to continue to be contributing to the historic district. There may be a second hearing where you have to determine whether they can be it's economically feasible to reuse them. But today, the only question is whether they are still historic. And I think we have 2 buildings where it seems like there's general agreement, and 1 building where there may be a question mark. And I will agree, Stacy had said for many years, many people thought that corner building was older and had a facade put onto it later in time. I think what we know today is there is evidence photographically, there's evidence from maps, there is evidence from the Ann Lewis stores built in other cities at that same time, that building, whether we love it or not, is in fact built during the period of significance. It retains its historic materials as it was built, and it is built of a style that is indicative of the architectural styles of its day. There may be a second hearing where you decide whether it's even feasible to retain a building that meets those criteria. But today, that's not the question. Today, the question is, do those 3 buildings meet the CHAP criteria to continue to contribute to the historic district? And I would say that Baltimore Heritage, after looking at this, after reviewing the images and looking at buildings in other cities, supports the CHAP staff recommendation that they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, can you send us back to our recommendation page? Thank you. So commissioners, before we put a motion to the floor, we have the recommendation. The buildings meet criteria 1 and 3 of the commission's criteria for designating districts and landmarks and possesses physical integrity. Therefore, staff recommends disapproval of the proposal to demolish these buildings before we have a motion? Would it like have a discussion amongst one another? Go ahead, Catherine.
I think it is critical for any historic preservation commission to realize that preservation of buildings with aesthetics we may not like is still critical for history and its preservation. And we, here in America, we tend to use a rolling 50-year clock. And there are a lot of buildings that now can qualify for a historic status that we may not necessarily like aesthetically, but that does not remove its significance from its surrounding context or its use during the past. I'd also like to remind everybody that if we went back to whatever the original structure was, we were not the original inhabitants of this area. And that is definitely a question once you start looking at that and, well, what was there originally versus what is extant today? That is a large can of worms. And we have to consider what is before us today and not necessarily what was there before that. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Okay. If there aren't any further comment, we have the recommendation. Do I have any commissioner that would like to put the recommendation on the floor?
I would move to accept staff's recommendation.
Second.
Do I have all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Thank you. So next on our agenda, we had 1530 Fleet Street, but we're going to move that. Am I correct, Eric?
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. So my question,
Can we?
I'm requesting to be heard.
Oh.
I have come a long way from here and.
hold on, come to the mic. Come to the mic, come on up. Give your full name.
My name is Deborah Tempera, and I am the owner of the adjoining property to the project that was supposed to be presented today, 1530 Fleet Street. I am requesting to the commission, I'm not requesting to the staff at this point, because I have requested since 2019 to have this building checked out. And I was told it would be, and there has been never any reports of the negligence of this building. This negligence is definitely supporting negligence for demolition. In fact, in 2017, I'm constantly told that it is a non-complying building, which is fine, but H&S told me personally in 2017 their intent was to demolish the building, but at this time they did not want to demolish it because of a lot of variables, which are slowly becoming transparent today, with a lot of work and effort on my part, which is ready to make me cry. I worked one whole month last month of writing letters to every code enforcement department, and all of it is not being transparent. So what I'm requesting from this commission, Morris and Ritchie, this was written to me today. Mr. Eric has placed all my emails and images to be reviewed by the commission. If you have not reviewed them, I would please request that the commission reviews them. I am requesting that you also review all the emails that I had sent to the commissioner of the building and to Mr. Hessler of Code Enforcement. I am requesting also, Mr. Leon has placed in his recommendation request that the adjoining property owner work with you throughout the construction process. That is as if this is already a given by H&S Bakery without being transparent about what is really going on with this building. So I'm wondering, did any of you see this illegal bracing inside this building? If you have not, one of my requests is you make sure that you do, because this bracing is attached to a shear wall of a building that I was certified back in 2006 by the National Parks Services. I've stabilized this building, and now it makes sense why the building was unstable when I received the building, but I stabilized it. I invested the money, I resolved it. Now, okay. I would request also that Norris and Ritchie, before coming, present a certified engineering drawing and why they did this. I had sent a certified letter to all of you, not to the commission, that my engineering report about this, which was contradictory. And now we have another bracing in front of the building that also does not have a certified engineer's drawing or permit after a so-called emergency, which is again causing movement. If this whole building is not transparent, they did receive one violation for the rear wall. If you would see this building, you would not allow this to happen to your building. So that is what I'm requesting. Morris and Ritchie does need to bring documentation and certified drawings. They need to do a pre-construction survey of the entire building. The housing department, you need to ask them to do what is right, and those building inspectors have to stop avoiding seeing the complete truth and write up the violations, because if not, this is definitely a building negligent for demolition. And no one is accountable. And my building is shifting to the east, theirs is to the west, and I need.
We understand. Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Eddie, by all means, we know that this was taken off, but
Yes,
if there's
this-
any comments you'd like to share with us, thank you.
We have heard extensively from Ms. Tempera, her concerns. I've uploaded her numerous emails and photographs and documentation to the Wix site, so the commissioners did have a chance to see her concerns, exactly what's been the problem here. Any of the bracing work that's been done has not been reviewed by staff, whether it's on the interior or the exterior. It never came before us. They presented this plan for reconstruction of the front facade some months ago. We worked out alternative design and material, which is the current design at the moment. The lead architect is out with an emergency surgery and is not available. Neither is anyone in his team familiar with this. The applicants, the owners, I've not heard from and was not aware that they were not going to be here either. So the architect that is still in the office today called to request officially to pull this item, and they will come in August.
Eddie, thank you. Catherine?
Can I just ask a quick question, Eddie?
Mhm.
And this, I just want to make sure I didn't miss it in the provided material.
Mhm.
It looks like the application and the documentation provided is really focused on the front facade.
Correct.
But it doesn't address any work with the roof or the other walls.
No.
Do you know if the intention is to also do work for those pieces, or literally just the front
The architect
elevation?
does numerous projects for H&S. They've been before the commission other times seeking, infill construction and other things. So they are aware of CHAP's purview over anything and everything on the exterior. So why they haven't addressed this at this time, I can't answer it.
So we don't know anything as far as the applicant's application. I understand we have some information from the neighbor presented. We don't have anything from the applicant's perspective that addresses what existing conditions are on the other facades.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So per staff's recommendation and the information that you gave us, Eddie, we're going to move on to the next topic on our agenda and leave 1530 Fleet Street up to staff to let us know when it would be on our agenda for the commission, okay?
Most likely August.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next on our agenda, 2020 West Fayette Street, 2022 West Fayette Street, 2024 West Fayette Street, 105 North Howard Street, and 107 North Howard Street, 5 and Dime District once again. My question is, we have it scheduled for 2 p.m., but I want to be mindful that if the applicants are here, are they here present to be able to present, even though it's 1:30? Okay. I mean, 2:30. Oh, not 1:30, 2:30. Thank you. Forgive me. What's going on, Harry? I appreciate it. So since they are here, the request, demolition, hearing two, demolition of substantial hardship. The applicant, Westside Partner LLC. The staff is Stacy.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. So we are returning to the Five and Dime Historic District and to a demolition hearing 2 for the parcels listed here. And the applicant is Westside Partners LLC. So we spoke about just the last item, the Five and Dime Historic District, but we are at a different end of the district. So I won't go into that, but these are, this highlights this corner here. Some of these parcels we looked at last, actually in May, and two of them the commission determined not to be contributing, but we'll go through. This is the site here. All right, this is facing north. This is just a view of Fayette Street facing north with the properties. And here they are labeled. So we have 220, 224, or 222, 224. Last month, the commission determined that 226 West Fayette Street and 101 North Howard Street, or not last month, I'm sorry, in May, that they determined that those items were non-contributing. And then 105 North Howard Street, which faces, it's A, this 4-story building on Fayette Street, and B, a building on Howard Street, and then 107 North Howard Street. Those are the buildings we're looking at today. Here we see a view of Howard Street facing east. And here are the properties in question. Today, again, we're looking at 105 and 107 North Howard Street, but 101 North Howard Street we determined was not contributing in May. Here's a view of the backs of the properties. We can get a good idea, starting to get a good idea of sort of the conditions of the rears of these properties. Again, this is facing west, and again, you can see actually 105 and 107 North Howard Street. You can see that the back of 107 North Howard Street is substantially collapsing. All right. So we'll go into the background. I just covered a lot of this in the previous item as well, the history with the MOA. But just again, I want to reinforce when the city came into ownership of these properties in 2007 and 2008. The majority of these properties were purchased. And in 2009, all of the properties were proposed for demolition by a previous development. But then in 2011, the CHAP staff determined that the structures were eligible for potential. They weren't in a district at the time, but were certainly should be considered. In 2018, the Five and Dime Historic District came into play, and these properties in May of 2023 were officially determined by this commission to be contributing to the district. All right, let's get ahead here. Okay, so the proposal is to demolish the buildings at 220, 222, 224 West Fayette Street, and 105 and 107 North Howard Street. All right, the application of the design guidelines. So we actually used our rules and regulations, and I know we've been reviewing a lot, but it's the last item. I'm going to read what's required for demolition hearing 2. So if a structure is determined to contribute to a local historic district or meets landmark criteria, staff shall schedule a second public hearing. Here we are. At this hearing, the commission will review a completed application for authorization to proceed for demolition. In addition, the applicant must provide some additional information. The additional information is required to determine whether demolition is necessary to avoid a substantial hardship, and whether denial of a demolition permit would result in no reasonable or beneficial use of the historic structure. The commission will also determine whether demolition will constitute a substantial detriment to the public welfare, and if demolition will be without substantial derogation to the intents and purposes of Article 6 of the Baltimore City Code. In making their findings, the commission may consider the following among other case-specific factors: the historic and architectural value and significance, architectural style, general design, arrangement, texture, material, and color of the structure in the immediate neighborhood, the location and visibility of the structure to be demolished, or structures in this case, the structural stability, hazardous conditions, health and public safety issues, and code enforcement history, and previous commission actions regarding the structures. And an authorization to proceed for demolition may be issued only if a property has been determined non-contributing to a local historic district, or the commission determines that a demolition of a contributing structure meets the following requirements of the ordinance. The demolition will be, as I think I went through these individually, but the demolition will be without substantial detriment to the public welfare. The demolition will be without substantial derogation from the intents and purposes of the CHAP ordinance, and the denial of the demolition permit will result in a substantial hardship to the applicant. At the conclusion of the second hearing, the commission decides upon the demolition application. If it is determined that all three of these factors have been met, they may approve the demolition. All right, so first let's talk about briefly, I know we looked at this again in May, but the historic and architectural significance of the structures. All right, so these buildings are located within the heart of the historic commercial district of Baltimore City. The proximity to Lexington Market, the harbor, the National Road, which is Franklin Street, and later the train yards made Howard Street and the surrounding retail district a prime location for the establishment of a wide variety of businesses. Early on, the area was primarily residential, with the exception of warehouses, taverns, and inns, as well as stables, carriage shops to service travelers and tradesmen. Commercial establishments, large and small, took advantage of the location, and by the late 19th century, the intersection of Howard and Lexington Streets was the heart of Baltimore's vibrant commercial shopping district. The buildings on the northeast corner of Howard and Fayette Street represent some of the oldest remaining buildings in the Five and Dime Historic District, constructed in the mid to late 19th century. The 3.5 and 4-story brick buildings are fine examples of the Federal and Italianate style row houses that were altered to accommodate commercial uses on the first and second stories. All of these buildings retain significant architectural details and convey their style and period of construction. So here we see them in the 1901 Sanborn map. Just going through some Sanborn maps here, 1914 to 1951 Sanborn map. And this is an undated photo where we can see that little piece that is actually 105 North Howard Street, but is on Fayette Street here. You can see that Palladian window on the second story, it's still there. This is just looking up Fayette Street. And here we can see that corner, we can see 105 and 107 North Howard Street, which is the Fix-It, 1963. Here we see that corner in 1975. Okay. And last month, we determined that these buildings, 220 West Fayette Street, is a contributing building. It's probably the earliest of the buildings. It dates probably the mid-19th century. It's a 3.5-story, 3-bay gable roof brick row house with simple brick jack arches over each window and a simple stone sill. A more modern storefront was installed on the first story in the 20th century. The building is a certain building type in Baltimore City that provided more space than dormers with that 3.5-story. It provided more space than dormers on the upper stories. While there are numerous examples of a 2.5-story building type throughout Baltimore City, it's far more rare to find the 3.5-story type in the city. This is 222 West Fayette Street. It's a 4-story, 3-bay brick row house from the mid to late 19th century. It has a dentiled wood cornice and a decorative second-story storefront window with large plate glass, as well as this first story, probably what was a more modern storefront. And this is right next to it. This is 224 West Fayette Street. It's a 4-story, 3-bay painted brick row house. It also dates the mid to late 19th century. Also is a dentiled wood cornice, but unlike its neighbor, only has a first-story storefront. And then we have 105 to 107 North Howard Street. It's a grouping of 2 3-bay row houses. They feature a lot of ornamental detail. They date to the late 19th, actually probably the 1870s based on their architectural detail and historic mapping. The 3rd and 4th story windows are 6/6. They have some stone sills again, and a really decorative hood over the windows, and decorative transom bars actually over the casement windows on the 2nd story windows. There's a high amount of ornamentation over the upper story windows. You can see that here. You can see some of those hoods with a sort of shell shape in the middle of them. All right. And then this is the property that is part of 105 North Howard Street, but faces onto West Fayette Street. It was just for a small period of time known as 228 West Fayette Street. It's been part of 105 North Howard Street for a very long time. But it's arguably one of the more distinctive properties along here, with this beautiful Palladian window on the second story, a third story cornice, and then a fourth story above with these tripartite windows. So all of these buildings were determined to be contributing to the historic district, representing some of the earliest structures that were adapted to be commercial structures in the early 20th century. All right. So next we're going to talk about, the location and visibility of the structures to be demolished. This is fairly brief. The buildings are located at the northeast corner of North Howard Street and West Fayette Street. They front on those streets. The light rail runs in front of the buildings on Howard Street. These buildings are highly visible on two major thoroughfares through Baltimore City. All right, so now we'll go into the present condition of the structures. First, we're going to talk about an engineer's report that was provided by the applicant. So a structural engineer provided a report regarding the condition of these buildings. Access to the interior of the buildings was limited due to the building conditions, but it was generally observed that the buildings have not been occupied for many years. In many cases, they were open to the elements, which led to the collapse of interior framing, mold, and active moisture. And in many cases, it has compromised the stability of the buildings. The report has been provided to the commission, but here are some key points. 220 and 222 West Fayette Street are visibly leaning to the east, with a gap of several inches between the buildings and collapsed interior framing. The engineer described the condition of 220 West Fayette Street as dire. The engineer could not access the interior of 224 West Fayette Street. However, it was observed that the windows on the rear appeared to have been missing for a long time, allowing for significant water infiltration. The engineer has stated since that since 220, 222, and 224 West Fayette Street, are all connected, if one is demolished, all should be demolished. The engineer also had limited access to 105 and 107 North Howard Street. However, the rears of these buildings have started to collapse, leaving the building open to the elements. The engineer recommended demolition of these buildings because of this. The engineer also raised concerns about the structural stability of the portion of this of 105 North Howard Street that actually faces onto West Fayette Street, since it is 2 stories taller than the 2 buildings around it, and that gave him some concern. In summary, the engineer states that, quote, structural rehabs and reinforcements would be challenging to design, costly to implement, and dangerous to achieve. Another piece we're going to talk about are citations and violations, and this is an image from Baltimore City Code Map. So in 2012, 220 West Fayette Street was issued a vacant building notice, still on the property today. The building has failed 78 inspections. So that's not great. In 2010, 224 and 105 North Howard Street, 224 West Fayette Street and 105 North Howard Street were both issued a razor rehab notice, and they're determined to be unfit for human habitation, and there's a vacant building notice on it. And they've both been inspected over 90 times, and the violation hasn't been abated. And in 2016, 107 North Howard Street was issued a razor rehab notice and determined unfit for human habitation. There's a vacant building notice on it, and it has failed 45 inspections. And previous action by the commission at the May 9th hearing, the commission did determine these buildings were contributing to the historic district. All right, so we'll talk about the hardship application. So first we'll look at the value of the buildings and the land. The applicant is in a land disposition agreement with the Baltimore Development Corporation to purchase and develop these properties and many of the other properties on the block bounded by Howard, Fayette, Lexington, and Park Avenue. These properties are still owned by the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore, and you can see on the screen the dates the city purchased those buildings. That's 2007 and 2008, and the value that they were purchased for. That ranges from $5, 3 of those buildings were only purchased for $5, to $363,000. And then what the current assessed value is in SDAT. And those are generally in the $100,000 value, except one that is out at 347. That being said, in 2019, BDC had an appraisal done of these properties, and that appraisal for land and buildings came to $420,000 from the appraisal. So that's the value of the buildings that we're looking at today. Aside from that, the applicant has stated that retaining and rehabilitating the historic buildings will create a financial hardship. To demonstrate that, the applicant has provided an estimate to stabilize and rehab each building, an estimate for the demolition of the buildings only, and a pro forma that shows the potential income stream for the rehab buildings along with the total project costs. The applicant has included estimates for the use of historic tax credits and funds from Project Core in their pro forma. They stated that per the applicant's pro forma, the project would have a negative internal rate of return on the deal, which would be undesirable to fund. And the documents have all been provided to the commission for review. All right, so neighborhood comments. The applicant, so staff reached out to the Market Center CDC, which is in the process of becoming the ARC. They don't have a formal comment today. Downtown Partnership of Baltimore, Baltimore Heritage. And the applicant received and provided to us several letters, actually 9 letters of support for the demolition of the buildings. Those letters came from Councilman Eric Costello, the Baltimore Development Corporation, the Bromo Arts District, the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore, University of Maryland, Baltimore, Crowd Fund, Oakview Group, Community Wealth Builders, and Everyman Theater. So analysis and recommendation. So the buildings at 222, 222, 224 West Fayette Street, and 105 and 107 North Howard Street are contributing buildings to the Five and Dime historic district as examples of mid to late 19th century commercial buildings associated with the early history of Baltimore's historic commercial district. The buildings are in a prominent location at the intersection of 2 major streets. This demolition would certainly impact this streetscape. The applicant has provided an engineering report speaking to the present conditions of the buildings. While the properties are suffering from significant deterioration of the interior framing and fenestration, the report does not suggest that the building is in danger of immediate collapse, only that the buildings need extensive stabilization, which may be expensive. All but one of the buildings has a vacant building notice on it, and the properties have been this way for many years with no resolution. The buildings have been inspected regularly, at least 6 times per year by DHCD, and the regular inspections have not led to any emergency demolition or stabilization. The applicant has provided cost estimates for demolition only and stabilization and rehabilitation of the buildings with a pro forma for the highest and best use of the buildings if they were stabilized and fully rehabilitated. The applicant's pro forma included the use of historic tax credits and money from Project Core, but their numbers still show that there would be a negative internal rate of return, and a positive internal rate of return is what attracts investors to real estate development, certainly not that. All right, the hardship test asks applicants to demonstrate that the project would be economically infeasible without the allowance of demolition of the structure. The applicant has demonstrated through the pro forma that retaining and stabilizing all of the buildings would create a project that would not be attractive to fund. However, there are other options the applicant should still explore aside from full demolition. The applicant should explore the cost of retaining portions of the buildings instead of full demolition, or incorporating certain parts of the buildings or certain buildings into a larger development, and present those options or numbers to the commission prior to moving forward with their demolition request. So staff's recommendation is this. I recommend disapproval of the request for full demolition at this time because the applicant has not demonstrated that they've met all 3 criteria. So staff recommends that the applicant return with a plan to retain portions of the historic building and more information on the cost of retaining those portions to either further flesh out the hardship application or to demonstrate that the portions of those buildings can be retained. Are there questions?
Tamara, go ahead.
Sure. I have one question, and it's really more related to the timeline. In reading the staff report, you've outlined a lot of kind of milestones throughout the years, but the one question I have is related to when you note that in 2015 BDC put out another RFP, but the current developer did not meet with CHAP staff till 2021.
So there's been a lot of RFPs for this site in a lot of different ways, broken up in many ways. And at each time that there's been an RFP that's been released, CHAP staff has been involved in that process, and there's often been like walkthroughs of the building, and I've gone to all of those to meet to talk about that. So it's just that this particular project, this particular developer came into the picture more recently.
Okay, so how far before 2021 did this particular developer come?
Yeah, there's someone from BDC who can answer that question. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Taylor. I'm the managing director of Baltimore Development Corporation. BDC has issued an RFP. We did issue one in 2015 after the Lexington Square Partners lawsuit was settled. We did not select any developer at that time. This particular RFP was released in 2018. The developer was selected at the very end of the year 2019. And then the agreement was ultimately signed at the very end of the year 2020.
Sister, thank you. We have the applicant. Is the applicant here? Come forth. And please give your full name for the record.
Sure. Commissioners, I'm Chris Janion with Westside Partners. Right here in this room right now, we have the opportunity to make an enormous investment in the future of our city and to revitalize two blighted blocks that have been mostly vacant for almost 2 decades. We need to all work together to get this project moving forward. As you can see by the many letters of support for the project, we've been engaged with various individuals and groups in and around the neighborhood who agree that the replacement of these buildings will not negatively affect the overall historic fabric of the neighborhood and will allow us to continue to move this impactful and mostly preservation-focused project closer to completion. The Compass will retain all of the historic fabric of the North Block that fronts Howard, Lexington, and Park, while adding to the continuous history being written within the neighborhood, a thoughtful mix of buildings of different vintages incorporated with new, efficient buildings aimed at attracting more people and businesses to downtown. We'll be drawing inspiration for the new building from the historic architecture that previously sat on the block, and we believe this project will be discussed decades from now as part of the reason why this neighborhood and greater downtown was able to be reimagined from a largely commercial district that was dead after 5 p.m. to a vibrant mixed-use area that is bustling with people. Focusing on people is the important idea here. Our project is centered around people, residents, visitors, employees, entrepreneurs, with a focus on fun experiences, community impact, neighborhood lighting, clean sidewalks and streets, safety, greenery, and improving the everyday lives of the people living in and visiting our city. We understand and appreciate the history, but at some point you have to choose whether these specific buildings in question today have lived their useful lives, or at the expense of progress, we're going to try and force a square peg into a round hole. The majority of the buildings in the neighborhood that are viable to be repurposed should be, but the ones that are in complete disrepair are too costly to repurpose and have small, inefficient floor plates, lack the marketability to future tenants, should be replaced by thoughtfully designed new buildings and uses that improve the neighborhood and greater city. The beauty in the neighborhood comes from the vastly different styles and sizes of buildings that were built and rebuilt over time. We're at a critical moment in Baltimore's history where we have the opportunity to create a more positive narrative and come together as a city to make really good things happen. Now on to specifics. Based on square footage, we're repurposing approximately 90% of the historic facades and buildings in this project and are only asking for approximately 10% to be replaced. CHAP guidelines allow demolition of a contributing structure if it meets the following requirements of the ordinance. 1, demolition will be without substantial detriment to the public welfare. 2, the demolition will be without substantial derogation from the intents and purposes of the CHAP ordinance. And 3, the denial of a demolition permit will result in substantial hardship to the applicant. We disagree with CHAP staff's recommendation and believe that we meet all 3 requirements and should be approved for demolition at today's hearing. Regarding requirement number 1, no substantial detriment to the public welfare. As noted by the many letters of support for demolition of these buildings will not cause substantial harm, inconvenience, or disruption to the surrounding community, public resources, or overall historic fabric of the neighborhood. The real detriment to the public welfare is to let these buildings stay in a deteriorated state that they're currently in on a major streetscape because there's no financially viable way to redevelop them. Regarding requirement number 2, no substantial derogation from the CHAP ordinance. The CHAP ordinance aims to protect and preserve historically or architecturally the Five and Dime district. Since we are retaining the majority of the historic fabric within the block, the demo of these 5 dilapidated buildings will have no significant impact on the historically or architecturally significant elements of the overall district. In fact, when walking around the Five and Dime district and the Howard Street corridor, there are facades of similar age and architecture to these specific buildings on nearly every block. Regarding number 3, substantial hardship. As Stacy has relayed, we spent a significant amount of time developing various financial models for the full restoration, and it is nowhere near viable. As they stand, we can potentially get up to 24 apartments in the buildings with 5 small retail spaces. Based on rents and valuation, the total completed value will be $4.5 million, best case scenario. If we use the assessed value of the buildings and add it to Whiting Turnit's construction cost estimate of almost $14 million, then add soft costs and financing costs to the total, it gets up to $18.3 million for 5 buildings that are only 25,000 square feet. As you heard earlier, based on the generous income valuation, that creates a $13.8 million gap between the cost and the potential value. The buildings would only be worth 24.5% of the cost to build. Included in our model was an aggressive tax credit allocation that is frankly unreasonable to assume that we would get, but we included them anyway to show the extent of the gap between value and cost. We included a $500,000 core allocation for applicable costs, a high-performance tax credit, and enterprise zone tax credit. But those two only affect the incremental increase in real estate taxes once the buildings are operating. We assumed state and federal historic tax credits. Both are a competitive process, and Maryland only has $9 million of credit available for the entire state. This adds a significant cost increase to small projects, approximately 20 to 30% extra to comply with the regulations for construction. These historic credits yield up to a 20% net benefit on eligible costs, which is approximately 70% of the total budget, for a total potential equity benefit of approximately $2.5 million from each the state and federal credit. If we were somehow successful in getting the maximum allocation of all of the eligible tax credits, the project would still cost over $8.2 million more than the value after completed. When we evaluated only the partial demo of the buildings, the cost generally remained the same, but we'd then become ineligible for any of the historic tax credits. Additionally, we would either be achieving only half of the density, yielding only half of the income, or we'd be at exactly the same model as the full restoration. Clearly, these were not viable options. Lastly, we evaluated keeping just the facades. Trying to incorporate various facades that have different heights, elevations, and gaps between them into a new building is incredibly costly, potentially infeasible due to current structural conditions, and because of the misaligned floor plates, does not allow a contiguous floor plate that we need to achieve for an efficient and financially viable model moving forward. This option did not work visually, structurally, or financially. So in summary, not only are there no efficient and viable uses for the buildings as they stand, there's no possible way to make the budget work even with the maximum competitive tax credits and grants available. There's no way to save the buildings in full or even partially. And we humbly ask the Commission to approve our plan to demo the buildings and allow us to move the development process forward after almost 20 years of failed attempts. We're asking you today to help us bring this important project closer to completion and allow us to move forward ahead in the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? Nicole.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I think I missed something. Did you say that you are going to, or were you planning to apply for high-performance tax credits or not?
It was something that we had put into the model to evaluate whether or not that would change any of the return metrics.
So you did include it within your pro forma?
Correct.
Okay.
Both high performance and enterprise zone for the commercial spaces.
So if you did receive approval to do the demolition, would you still apply for high-performance tax credits and enterprise zone funds?
For the residential pieces of the project, yes.
Okay.
And for the commercial pieces, yes.
Do you have any affordable housing involved in your project at all?
So what we've been trying to do, and this is not on this block, but I can talk to it about the north block. We've tried to create a mixed income neighborhood, and it's kind of looking at an entire neighborhood as a whole, what really fits in and what's needed. So we've got a bunch of LIHTC projects that are around the area. We want to be a mixed income that kind of bridges the gap in between, Class A and LIHTC.
Are you
Workforce
familiar?
housing.
Are you familiar with the inclusionary housing? Okay.
Yes.
Which would, once approved, will require all projects that do receive high-performance tax credits or any type of subsidy to have 10% of their units to be affordable to those who are 60% of AMI. You're familiar with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Will you be compliant with that if that is the case?
Yes.
You had mentioned 10% of your buildings, I guess in your pro forma, would be partially demolished. What part of that were you looking at? Or
So all
when
of
you
the
were
buildings
doing
that
your
we're looking at
models?
right now, we have the block to the north of this as well, in addition to some other properties on the south block. So I'm talking about the greater project that we have that's not inclusive of these 5.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks.
Catherine.
Is the structural engineer who wrote the report also the structural engineer on the master project?
They're here and can talk to that. So
I mean, that's just a simple question.
Yes, so there are a lot of different pieces and a lot of different variables within the project. So we've got new construction, we've got rehabilitation, we've got different pieces. So there are various structural engineers.
Structura is the engineer on what?
On this particular project.
Okay.
The one that we're talking about today.
Okay, so I have a couple questions, and sorry, you just happen to be right behind me. So if I understand correctly, you guys signed the agreement with BDC in 2020. What
2020, yes.
What actions have you guys taken to stabilize the buildings and prevent further deterioration since then, if any?
We don't own the buildings.
Okay. So you can take no action because they're still held by the BDC?
They're still owned by the city.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify that. So a challenge I am having looking at this is you're giving us some additional information about the building stock that's being maintained as part of the project. But we don't have any information about what that really is. And I think the challenge there is because we are talking about specific addresses. But for me, it's hard to hear and have confidence in, 90% of the project or whatever. We're keeping the fronts and square footage of the historic buildings, but we don't have any kind of map or indication of what that extent of area is. So it's hard to see that and compare it to this and go, oh, okay, yeah, in the larger project, then that percentage is very different than what we are seeing with the requests for demolition. So depending on how my fellow commissioners feel, I think it would be helpful to have some indication of the total project and really what's being retained address-wise versus what's being requested for demolition. That's just something I'm struggling with. I don't know if anyone else has that same opinion or not.
I can definitely understand that, especially because I brought it up. But because the other addresses are not asking to be demoed, they're not in the hearing. And then the way that we were told how the process goes is that demo comes first and then master plan comes next. So those would obviously be brought up at that point too. I'm happy to share any other ideas, but you can defer to staff.
Yeah, we discussed bringing the demolition first before they came to the master plan because some of their project depends on the ability to demolish these buildings. But there's no reason that we couldn't bring that information if that's what the commission wanted. But we typically try to not include new construction in a demolition request.
So I think the challenge here is a larger conversation. I don't know where to look. Is the larger conversation that we're having as a commission about demolition and when it's appropriate to have kind of a larger scale demolition, which is what's being requested today, and the plan for what's going to be done with that area and timeline and concerns about demolition by neglect and all of that. And so that isn't necessarily specifically a comment to you guys, but maybe to staff, because it's when we have no plan for or idea what's going to be happening in the context of the historic district in the neighborhood, I just think that makes it more challenging to weigh the public benefit and public welfare, the substantial detriment, and some of those things, because the reality is that the demolition isn't in a vacuum. And to me, that is a struggle to try to weigh without that additional information.
Excuse me, any other commissioners?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, is there what's that? I'm sorry.
I think we'll definitely talk about that.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know if there was a quick response to that from staff about that. Like in the case that you have a demolition 2 hearing, but we don't look at the forecast, right, of what's going to happen. What could be implemented to be able to see that?
I do want to point out that there is a potential massing study that was submitted to us as part of the information that's on. Yeah. Huh?
Yeah, I think our
Oh, it's the last, okay. Then I mixed them up. Apologies. Ignore that comment. I mean, just that to me, and comments about being informed by surrounding historic buildings, that concept massing does not do that. And so I think, again, when we're talking about this whole context and everything, that's just a really big struggle for me.
Okay. Thank you. What we'll do next, we have one.
I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead, Kip. You have a question for, okay, go ahead.
Just real quick, it was noted that this particular parcel is part of the greater project, right?
It is separate, but it's all part of the same LDA.
Part of the same LDA and part of the same RFP from BDC, is that correct? So I'm just curious, if it's voted to per the recommendation, what happens to the project in this particular case? The complete project does not move forward, or just that parcel, the rest of the project moves forward, this parcel will just have to be rethought?
There is no other real option to make these work. So
the greater project dies, and it goes back to BDC as a no, and it goes out to
20 years of it not working, it would be really sad if it didn't work again.
But is that what happens? I guess maybe that's a question for BDC. Is that what happens? Like, one parcel doesn't go forward, the entire project doesn't go forward?
This is a very important parcel for us to make sure that we're able to master plan going forward. So this is holding up the entire project.
Okay.
So,
you don't get my question. I'm trying to see if the project succeeds without
You're not,
this parcel.
you're getting an
is
answer.
this the market rate? Is this the one carrying?
No.
When you say this is a very important parcel, I'm trying to.
They all are. I mean,
distinguish.
yes, we have the north block and the south block. But we also, with the amount of effort and time and money that we're putting into this project, we can't have 5 vacant buildings sitting right next to the.
Well, can I ask, for the 9% of historic properties that you are saving, I know you don't have information on that right now, but can you tell us the addresses are 100 blocks?
It's the entire block
The
that is
rest of.
bound by Lexington,
show us.
Howard, Marion, and Park Avenue.
Sorry, on this map, the top, you can see Marion, Fayette, Lexington, Marion, Howard, Lexington, and Park.
So everything in there that's MCC is proposed to be preserved?
We
in
don't have
some
to come
form
to a
or
demo
fashion.
hearing for anything else
No,
besides these
I get
5
that.
on the.
Now, I get what you're here for today, but I'm asking about the broader, since you're not
I mean,
sharing the full
when-
broader.
if we hopefully get, the decision that we're able to move forward with these, one, we're not planning on demoing these until we actually start the project. So we will not start demoing them immediately, nor partially or fully. But number two, that allows us to begin moving the whole process forward and then come back to CHAP for the master plan, well, UDAP, and then CHAP. So, ideally, we would like to schedule that for next month.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I just got to ask you this. I mean, Commissioner K. Powell said it much better than me, but I'm going to be blunt. If, this doesn't go in your favor, does the project die?
I don't really know. I can't answer that directly. Because
Okay.
we have to go back and, these buildings don't work. Then it's a chain reaction to what we're planning on the flat grassy lot. And that's, half of the project.
Understood.
So I have to go back and then we're not planning for it to die, period.
Gotcha. Understood. Okay. Any other questions for him, Commissioner?
I'm sorry, I stepped out for a second. What is your schedule? Did you already share that with the group?
Schedule for which part?
Development schedule for this particular
It's going to
block?
depend on the public hearing process that we're moving through right now.
So
we have to-
assuming that you receive all the approvals, what is the schedule?
Then we would have, as kind of a typical process, about 12 months worth of A&E until we can get our permits, and then 20 to 24 months of construction after that.
And you've already identified funders for this project, the bank. I know about the historic tax credits, federal and state, but you have
The
people
majority of
interested?
that happens right before we start construction. We're 18 months out right now, assuming about a 6-month public approval process for everything else. But yes, we always start early discussing with everybody.
Okay. I was just wondering, since your pro forma shows debt service, I was wondering if in fact you had already started talking to anyone.
Of course, we do. And we've got relationships with, a handful of different debt sources.
Okay.
But that was the pro forma on these 5 buildings also. That had a, again, negative 16.5% IRR.
Thank you.
That wouldn't be shown to any of the debt sources because that wouldn't be funded.
So if I understand correctly, you do not currently have the project funded because you're too early in the design stages?
In any kind of development process, the entire amount of funding doesn't get closed on until you're ready to put a shovel in the ground. Which doesn't mean that we don't have discussions, that doesn't mean that we don't have people that we're talking to, that doesn't mean that we don't have people that are interested in doing it. But again, in every kind of development process, you would never close on debt before because then you're paying on.
Which I understand, but I do also know, especially for the state historic tax credits, you have to have some documentation about a lender's intention to fund, even if it's not necessarily closed yet. Do you have any letters or written understanding with certain investors or lenders, et cetera, that are committed to the project?
Again, we have a bunch of people that we've been talking to. If we needed a letter for commitment, I'm sure we could get one.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. We have 6 people who have signed up for public testimony, but we only have 5 who said they want to testify. So the first name on my list is Johns Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage. I'm here to testify in favor of the CHAP staff recommendation to deny the application today. And I want to make 2 points. One is about the high bar that should be set for demolishing historic properties and proving economic infeasibility. I know we've heard to some extent an engineer's report and we've heard some finance discussion. I want to share with you as a historian another project that came before this commission maybe 12 years ago, and that's the Fairfield Inn on President Street and Lombard Street. There was a group proposing to develop that, including the block included historic houses across from the Carroll Mansion. They said it couldn't be done. They went through a hearing 1. They came to a hearing 2. They had engineers. They had economic analysis that said you cannot save those buildings CHAP Commission said no and stood firm. That group ended up selling the project to another group that was able to develop the hotel that is there today, including the historic houses that are still on Lombard Street. So I share that to encourage you to be strong. Second thing I want to second point quickly is we have I have met with Chris at least 2 times, maybe more. He and his colleagues have discussed the project with my board of directors, and I think that we share his vision for this project as the whole, the bigger revitalization of what's called the super block. I will admit I continue to not be able to get my head around the way this parcel fits into the larger project that includes Lexington Street, Reed's Drugstore, Howard Street. What we are fearful of is that an approval and a demolition today of all of the buildings that are incorporated in this part of the project in no way guarantees that the rest of the project happens. And we think very highly of this development team. We share their vision, we share their passion, and we know that sometimes even the best intentions and the best capacities go awry. And we are very much unclear what happens if this part of this project moves forward and we get a demolition on on Howard and Fayette, and then the world shifts. And what we have, we don't know. So I'm going to leave you with that question mark and our reiteration to support the CHAP staff to set that bar very high and to require the absolute most in exploration before finding that there is no economically feasible way to save parts or all of these buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list, we have Jason. I don't want to pronounce the last name wrong, but it's spelled Dreher.
Yeah, Jason Dreher.
Oh, thank you, Jason.
I'm representing Structura, the firm that wrote the engineering report.
And state your name for the record for the mic.
Jason Dreher, Structura. My colleague Mark Erdman wrote the report. He's out of town for a few weeks, so I'm here representing our report, the work that we did. In addition to the economic hardship of retaining portions of these structures, as Chris has outlined, I want to add in putting in and installing the temporary bracing systems that would be necessary to retain those facades is an extremely dangerous activity. In order to brace those facades, you have to be braced before you demolish the existing buildings behind them, which means you have to get personnel and equipment inside those spaces. And as you've all read the report and seen the photos, those buildings are partially collapsed. So asking personnel to get into those buildings to install bracing, to install rakers, to underpin is dangerous and certainly not something we would recommend. So I want to make sure that we consider not only the economic hardship, that's obviously a major component of this, but the danger that we'd be asking contractors and subcontractors to engage in.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on our list, we have David, the last name Thank you.
Yes. I'm Davin Hong with Hanbury. We are the architect for the project.
Thank you.
Sorry, here's a presentation I'm pulling up.
Okay. Mr. Hong, if there's anything you want to speak about as they get your technology together, that's fine if you'd like to speak, or if you want to wait.
Well, a lot of the images were in the presentation earlier. So
Okay.
I can speak to it. But if you recall from the drawings that were shown, we have 7 different properties on the site with, as discussed, potentially only 25 apartment units that would fit in it, and 5 separate retail spaces. So as stating the obvious, the buildings were built and designed as separate buildings that have separate uses. The vision for the project is to consolidate the lots to accommodate a larger tenant that would be able to have a larger footprint with larger floor plates that are open. You can imagine that having separate lots with separate party walls would not be conducive to that. And even if you were to remove the walls and just preserve the facades, the windows do not align because the floor elevations do not align. If you were to put in new floors behind the facades, you would have conditions that are very awkward with the relationship between the windows and the floors. In order to mitigate that, you would have to step the floor, and that would create difficult ADA issues within the building. So the project would be severely hampered in terms of what possibilities are for redevelopment of this site. The retail spaces, having 5 separate retail entrances really limits the ability for a large retail tenant to take up the site, or even having 2 or 3 tenants. If you just think about what they were built for, these are small storefronts built for very small shops of that era. And that is not the vision or the kind of the what this district would really need for it to be economically vibrant and thriving. So the rest of the site, as we discussed earlier, there are facades that will be retained with different uses behind them. But in this case, with the smaller footprints and smaller facades, it's really difficult for that to be reused.
Mr. Hahn, what we're going to do, when your presentation comes up, I'm going to give you the opportunity to come back up and speak if need be, but I'm going to let some other folks who have signed up speak, and if your presentation is ready, then you're welcome to come back up, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Chris? Is Chris here?
Oh, he already spoke.
I'm Chris, I'm sorry. You already spoke. I'm sorry. Forgive me, man. You good. You good. Nicole King?
Hello, my name is Nicole King, and I'm a professor in the Department of American Studies at UMBC. I research place, power, and economic development with a focus on the tensions between preservation and development. So I recently moved to Holland's Market, but resided in the west side of downtown for more than a dozen years when I first moved to Baltimore, and still have an office at Maryland Art Place on Saratoga Street because I really love the west side of downtown, and I want to see that part of the city thrive. I oppose the full demolition and support the CHAP staff recommendation for the superblock properties within the 5 and Dime Historic District, and strongly feel that the west side of downtown distinguishes itself and its development potential from newer development projects such as Port Covington or Baltimore Peninsula now and Harbor East through its historic architecture and character, especially along the Howard Street corridor. So this historic character is what makes this part of the city so worth redeveloping in the right way by preserving what is so distinct about the city for future generations. So walking down Howard Street in the vicinity today, as I often do, there are various successful projects, as John's mentioned, focusing on adaptive reuse of historic buildings, such as the 1980s redevelopment of Chesapeake Commons, which I lived in for 5 years as a beautiful building. It was a total fire, gut rehab. Also, the Mayfair facade, which is being redeveloped right now, when many of us thought it might not be for a long time. Also, the restoration of the old Pollock's Furniture showroom into beautiful lofts, just to name a few. So having researched and written extensively about the previous debacles of the past superblock development projects, originally I was excited for the Compass project when it was presented a few years ago. I went to the presentation in 2021. I liked that it was in phases. We wouldn't get to the issues that we're having here today, these large projects where you can't do anything without the complexities that the developer is presenting on. So however, the developers have missed numerous deadlines, and after the testimony from the development team today, I still do not feel the fiscal constraints here are a substantial hardship or should prevent the preservation of these important buildings. It costs money to preserve buildings, and the developers came in and got an LDA and sought to develop these buildings in a historic district that you designated. And that should actually mean something to CHAP, to the citizens who care about preservation and the history and the vibrancy of the west side of downtown. So considering the CHAP commissioners, you guys voted unanimously in May that these buildings do contribute to the historic and cultural fabric of the historic district, we should preserve as much of that character and in this part of the project as we can. So I want to reiterate that these are irreplaceable historic structures that give Baltimore City its architectural character and its distinct charm, and these historic structures should be incorporated into any development plan. We need a longer view on the repercussions of destroying historic buildings in Baltimore for developers who cannot get it together. So much demolition without development has happened here, such as the big hole I walked by on the way here in downtown that was once the historic Mechanics Theater. So in conclusion, I hope the commission agrees with CHAP's recommendation, and we can work towards, with these developers or other developers, a development project that truly incorporates its historic businesses and buildings and gets the West Side thriving again. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Next on our list, we have Ms. Kate. You're not going to testify? Okay. Thank you. Is his presentation ready? Come right back.
Well, most of the points have already been made, but one thing I want to point out in this cover image is the pre-existing Trailways building that was right next to the sites in question. It has since been demolished, but it was built in the mid-20th century in a modernist style. Can you go to the next slide?
You can, there's that clicker right there.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
just press that point and it should advance it. If not, it won't advance it. All right.
Okay, so go to the next one. And this shows the two buildings in blue are the buildings that the commission has approved for demolition, and the orange buildings are the 5 buildings that are in question today. You just, with this image and this next one, if you flip to the next slide, it's just to demonstrate how small these parcels are and how subdivided the site is. Next slide. And you see here, this is a view on Fayette Street and Howard Street. Go back to the Fayette Street. Okay. You could see here the misalignment of the floor elevations and the windows, and it's quite a big difference if you were to read the difference between the elevations of the buildings. And next one. Less of an issue on this side with these two buildings being very similar, but as a whole, the project would have, it would be difficult to consolidate to make this into a single building. So as we look, next slide, as we look at the corner view and imagining the buildings to be demolished, next slide. We have not yet designed the building. This is massing only, but we would respect the scale and the articulation of the surroundings and respond to them. And the source of inspiration would be the Trailways bus station that was pre-existing in the site next door, and having this building, this new building, really pay homage to that. Yes.
So if you go up, so it looks like if you were permitted to tear down these buildings, it would be one contiguous lot with the former Trailways site. And so what's showing up where the little green trees are, that could be one large building?
Right now,
There's
that,
no historic buildings between the open lot and this if you were to succeed in getting all these buildings torn down.
there are no buildings where those trees are.
But I'm saying there'd be no buildings between the empty lot and the corner. So you would have wholly uninterrupted building site if you were given this.
We are still, we have not yet designed
Yes.
the project, but that would be the intent, yes.
I just have a quick question. Okay.
Go ahead. You have a question?
Can you go, Davin, do you mind going back to the aerial? That's fine too. That's fine.
That's the
Commission knows I like hypothetical questions. The blue, like, so there's a large parcel at the corner, a large parcel in the middle, and then obviously these other additional parcels that are being proposed for demolition are all singular buildings. They've always been designed as such, right? Again, just asking, you know, as an architect, as builder, do you see it feasible to build a singular building at the corner, singular building in the blue strip there, and then renovate each building and adaptive reuse those buildings, whether you needed to do additions, individual buildings, but if you just treated these as all separate parcels and built buildings, new construction or renovate, that's feasible?
Technically, that's feasible.
Okay. And then I just
Yes.
Hold on. We got.
I just wanted to ask the technical aspect of that, right? The other question I had, I guess, was I had another question, I forgot that one. But the third question, I just, in terms of the historic significance of these buildings, do you agree or disagree that each of those red buildings are historically significant? My question would be, do you disagree with Johns Hopkins or the others that these buildings are not historically significant? Do you state that those are not significant?
I think that there are a large number of buildings of this era in this district, and
These buildings there, do you feel that those have no significance historically and they should be knocked down?
I do not think that they have as much significance as the surrounding buildings.
Do they have any significance at all historically? I'm learning from other people. I just want you to answer the question. Is there any historic significance on these buildings?
I would say that they don't have the significance that was.
So your answer is no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You done with your presentation? You good?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one question.
By all means.
Has, it's been mentioned that there are several kind of iterations and, looking at different things. Was it examined to look at saving some of these lots but maybe not others, or was it all of them or nothing, or was, keep these two or not those three considered at all?
We haven't gone to that level of granularity, but the vision for the project is for a new replacement that is more kind of evident of change, and the use of portions of the building would really limit the kind of definition of that and provide really a kind of a segmented building that is sort of piecemeal and really limits the kind of architectural character that can be achieved.
I would just argue in response to that our historic communities are piecemeal because they have small lot sizes, and that is the character that we typically see. Our large monolith buildings are a contemporary today style as opposed to several buildings. Anyway, but thank you. You answered my question.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Stacy, can you take us to our recommendation page? Oh, that's right, we have to connect it. Commissioners, while Stacy's getting us to our recommendation page, let's have conversation amongst one another. Are there any other comments or conversations you guys would like to have before we put a motion on the floor? Go right ahead, Peter.
So I agree a lot with what a lot of commissioners have been saying here. I mean, first of all, I would love to see this project move forward. That being said, I think the developer has not sufficiently explained to us why we have to do this all or nothing approach. You know, we have estimates for raising them, or we have estimates for rehabbing them exactly as they are, and I think some combination is needed. Maybe save some facades of some buildings where floor plates align. Maybe keep the entire building freestanding. I'd like Capow's suggestion of looking at some infill to have that granular, small-scale development that really does define the district. I would very much like to see a proposal that takes some middle ground into consideration rather than the all-or-nothing approach that has been presented here. I had another point that I was going to make, and now I'm blanking on it. I'll come back to you, but...
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I would echo what my colleagues have, my fellow commissioners have been putting on the floor. I would also like to see a master plan. See? I knew that, see? We've been together a year now, year and a half? Yeah, so the master plan would be helpful for us.
Thank you, Doctor. Ann?
Yeah, I will say this question around, there's something that came up earlier that we started to talk about a little bit, and that is that question of like, do you see a master plan first? Do you not? And I want to really highlight what Johns Hopkins said, which is approving the demolition of this area as a trade-off for this great thing promised in the master plan is a very dangerous game, and that has gotten us in a lot of trouble. We also have situations, of course, where we have demolished the mechanic and we still have an empty hole. We have confusing ones that I find personally really confusing, like what's happened on Park Avenue. Right now, you have half of Marduk's hanging out in the blue sky and the back end of buildings that were clearly demolished by heavy construction on a site that's questionably happening or not happening. And, you know, I think we have some of the same developers at play here, and that's confusing, and I think it's a very dangerous game. What we have we have these historic resources. We were left behind by development for a long time, and this is a gift that this is the legacy, but also the gift and promise that we have in Baltimore. And the granularity that defines this district is not a bad thing. Is it supportive of big box retail? No. They can stay in Harbor East and they can hang out on Pratt Street. They just got a new tenant down there, you know, that's not what this is about. And the National Trust for Historic Preservation has done a lot of research into this. They call it older, smaller, better. These are properties that are really critical to our economic ecosystem. They're for new small businesses. They intrinsically are for women and minority-owned businesses to start up and thrive. There's real data and research that supports that. So I don't know why we should automatically default to this kind of big box mentality and look at it this way. A couple of other points, federal tax credits are not competitive. You just apply for them and you get them. The state historic tax credit commercial is competitive, and it's $20 million, not $9 million. That was it. I just think we really have a special thing here, and that's our responsibility is to be the stewards of this legacy and see it to the next turn.
Thank you. Oh, when we're in conversation, we don't allow public comment. Commissioners, are there anyone else? Garrett?
I think I share the conflict expressed by the fellow commissioners. I am a pragmatist. I am willing to sacrifice these buildings if they are the only way to accomplish the larger goal of the redevelopment of the block. I am not sure that's the case. I would like to not decide this today. I would like to urge the important players to go through one more effort at alternative dispute resolution and to see if either they can convince the commission that their way is the only way, or come up with an alternative that seeks some kind of a compromise. Maybe there is no compromise, but sitting here with the knowledge I have, I'm unsure if the only way to permit this block to go forward on a large scale is a sacrifice of these buildings. So I will, on any vote, abstain.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Catherine?
I guess I have a concern and then a procedural question. My procedural question is if we felt as a commission that additional information is really needed to make the prudent decision, is that something that we can request to delay the vote? Or would we need to have a vote today and then the whatever plays out after that vote is concluded?
I think it's either or. I think a vote of disapproval with a recommendation to come back with more information would be fine.
Okay, so then my concern is that the one indication of that we have that might be coming in the future instead of these buildings is an extremely dense, very large monolithic kind of structure that is not indicative of the historic district and the surrounding. And to me, that is a very big concern in regards to the historic character of this district. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners who'd like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I do have one question. I know that staff had mentioned that they've been a part of the RFP walkthroughs and stuff. Have we also been in conversation with BDC about options that don't involve the complete demolition of these properties?
No, this is I mean, we've asked, in this conversation, we've told the applicant that that's the staff recommendation to come back with some different options to explore. But in our conversations, I've been asked about the potential to demolish these buildings at sites, and the answer has always been that that would be something the commission would have to review.
Yeah, it's just my concern that when we're looking at development in Baltimore City, our agencies aren't talking to each other. And this is just another example. There are different priorities and not the same priorities or the same goals. And I think that's something that I would like as a commissioner to start occurring so that we can, people can be aware of what each of our roles are in this process and, you know, so that we can at least have more information and also be on the same page about what we're preserving, what we're not, and what our ultimate goal is.
Thank you, Dino. Oh, I appreciate it, but as I've said before, no comment while we're deliberating. Yes, K-Pow.
Just a few things. I agree. It's unfortunate. I think that when we're writing LDAs and working with BDC and the city and CHAP staff, everybody at the beginning of that RFP process and establishing a criteria should have been established to say, hey, these buildings are contributing at that time, and that part of the RFP is that the respondent needs to deal with that, and that because that doesn't happen, it opens up for the developer to be able to go and say, hey, I'm going to knock these down. So I'm also at the same place where Commissioner Powers is, like, in the sense that, you know, it's, you know, because that the criteria is not established, that they do have that, you know, right and the ability to go and say, I'm going to develop this the way I see fit to go forward with that and get approval and not. And if that allows them approval through the LDA process or BDC process, so be it, right? So for us, I guess we have to look at it saying that, you know, that you look at it in context of its historic, contribution to the city and to the state and to the location. I'm, and asking the architect, there's a technical ability to be able to develop that site in different ways. Whether it's the best for the performer, not best for the performer, there's other ways of doing it. So whether that's preferable for the developer here or not, if the fact that they can just sell the piece off and say, yeah, I'm not going to deal with it because it's not going to be financially feasible and the rest of the project's going to sit there and the community that's fighting for the buildings are okay with it for sitting there for another 10 years vacant. That's the ultimate, sort of resultant, right? So it's hard. It's hard for me to say yes and no on this kind of a project. I look at it that it was never meant to be a big building, and so I don't know why we're looking at this project as a big building ever. I would never try to. I don't know why the focus was for the structural engineer or the architect to even talk about multiple facades coming together where that's not feasible. Of course, it's not feasible. It's a singular buildings, so I don't think that's even a question. This was never a big building site. It was multiple buildings. I think it should stay that way, and there's a development there that can happen as multiple buildings, even if it's not in the preference of the performer of the developer. At the same time, I don't want this site to also sit here forever, for 20 years, another 20 years as a vacant site. So I don't know what my decision is right now, but right now I'm really torn, and I think probably I would push for additional information to say, that I don't know if it's the end-all be-all without seeing the viability of looking at this development in multiple buildings. Until someone says that doesn't work, I can't say that the demolition is the only probably aspect in my only direction. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm seeing a consensus with everyone as far as more information needed, but the opportunity to really find a way to help this location. And so with the recommendation that we do have from staff, my question to you all is, do we put in place now, we need more additional information, as someone has said here, a complete project, or Doctor, what's the word you used that Peter was looking for? Master plan, right. Are we looking for that as well? So I just wanted to table that before we talk further. Yes, ma'am.
I have, I guess, a question. I had some thoughts, but I'll ask a question first to what you just said. Are you saying that we would postpone a vote today and ask that they come back with additional information? Or are you closing all, kind of testimony today and then we come back with, I'm trying to understand process and procedure.
So what I initially was saying was, if we choose to approve the staff recommendation, but because of what we were presented today, do they come back with additional information as a master plan that gives us a more discerned decision? But if all of the commissioners here feel differently about that as a group, then the recommendation can change.
Okay, so then my next procedural question would be, if for some reason we agreed with staff today, and this is, I know the developer can't respond to this, so I'm just gonna say it as a thought. Understanding what we heard today and understanding that the developer, has stated that they have looked at alternatives, does staff believe that the request would come back as partial demolition and new construction? Like, what's the next that you're looking for in terms of procedure?
Yeah, and so I'll answer that, and I have one little thing, if that's okay. I think there could be multiple venues. There could be, returning with some feasibility studies of retaining certain buildings, retaining certain portions of buildings. I'm sort of leaving that open to the applicant, whether it's that or whether it's, cost, showing that is also, as they said, they've explored it. We just did not receive that information. Whether it's submitting, no, this is also economically infeasible, or whether it's providing, some different, I just think they need to provide, whether it's plans or whether it's more cost, that's sort of up to them, or what the commission would like. The commission may want to direct them to that, but it could be either one of those items. And that's, I think in the past when we've had these hearings, they've have returned with other options. It just, or return with more information to continue to make their point that they cannot do that. Even, I've looked at these options and here are the numbers for the options and why that doesn't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so just kind of listening to that, the staff believes that there was not enough information presented from the developer, given that you're missing the in-between, the what if. So is that
Right,
what
staff
you're-
thinks that we need to see that in between, at least the work that they've, I understand they've looked into, we just don't have the final product of that. And just, I did want to point out that staff has worked closely with BDC for many, many years on that. There isn't a lack of communication on the LDA. Staff was consulted in that, and they've been really generous to include us in that process and made it really clear in the LDA that this isn't a local historic district and all exterior work would have to come to CHAP. That's been upfront since the beginning. So just wanted to make that clear.
Are we just punting the inevitable down? I mean, what is, I mean, you're just, I'm not gonna come back to say like, oh, you know, I think ultimately they're gonna show that it doesn't work still.
That's right.
So I don't know what we're punting. I mean, if we're punting it, I don't know what we're getting at.
We have the option of just going with the staff recommendation to disapprove the request to demolish, and then if the applicants want to come back with another proposal, they can, right? So that's an option for us.
Oh, Doctor,
My question is, it seems as if we accept the staff's recommendation that the applicant returns with greater detail about the plans, but the first three of the staff's recommendation would, I think, close off our options toward the end, because I think we would be upfront agreeing to what may become issues in the final portion when it is presented to us again. So I would be uncomfortable with voting in favor of the staff recommendation, not because necessarily I disagree with it, but because it would, I think it would close off other options for further discussion.
I just wanted to say we could just say the commission tables the decision and ask the applicant to come back with the recommendations, which is the last sentence there. And that would solve your problem.
Okay.
I think.
With that?
I think for me, it would solve, because the issue from the staff's perspective, as you know, I understand it, is that there is not enough information being presented. You know, what I will say from where I sit, like others and not all on this commission, you know, I have a lot of thoughts. You know, I have a lot of things, all of which I won't share at the moment, but I think in this case, there is a question of specific location versus greater good for the city. I think there is a lot of conversation about, you know, vacancy in the city, about the reality of how people live today. I asked very pointed questions about timeline for a reason. I look at and do consider the reports on violations and raise and rehab orders. Those don't come easily. They're there for a reason. And they haven't been addressed. And so I look at that, and there are repercussions for things like that not being addressed, which is why we're here today, and why probably I would imagine some of the report says what it says. So I have a lot of questions, but I also am curious about the in-between, the what if they saved a portion of it, and that's the part that they did not provide. So, you know, I would love if we tabled the vote and could get more information and at least hear from the applicant that they show their work on what they said they did.
Thank you, Tamara. Go ahead, Peter.
I guess I don't see how approving staff's recommendation precludes them from coming back with more information for that middle ground. I think we're all basically on the same page here. I, for one, would be in favor of the staff recommendation. If they don't think they can make it work with parts of these buildings or all of these buildings coming back, then maybe it doesn't work, but I think they need to show us why it doesn't work if they want to take them down.
Gotcha. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Catherine.
Dr. Rodwell, I'm trying to understand your point about concerns that if we agree with all 3 points, that'll kind of close down their options, because my understanding is that is the text that's in our demolition to kind of official procedure, right? Those are the points that they have to prove that are the case, or, yeah. They have to prove that those 3 points are true in order for the demolition to be approved. Is that correct? So from that perspective, if that's what's in our text language that has to be proven, then those are the 3 points that we have to be comfortable with as a commission. So I'm trying, I didn't quite understand what you were thinking as far as feeling like that limited them. Can you explain that a little bit more?
I understand, and I agree with you.
Okay.
I think that the difference might be between saying that we're not going to approve the request to demolish because the demonstration of economic hardship has not been satisfactorily demonstrated, versus we don't think that this proposal is appropriate and we are disapproving it because we want to see if there's a better proposal that can be put forth in terms of the scope of the project. I think that's the distinction.
I feel like it's both,
And
in my
they're not in
opinion.
conflict. Those two things are not in conflict.
Right.
And I'd also like to say as well, I mean, I like the fact that it says the applicant returns. And I think all of us, there's a consensus here, we're saying return with something, whatever that is, master plan or different information, or how do we say there. Peter, you had your hand up again?
Well, no, I think we've kind of talked around. I would like to make a motion to approve
I
staff's
would too.
recommendation.
I definitely would too. So the recommendation is there. Do I have a motion to approve it?
One thing, sorry.
Motion today.
Go ahead, Kapal.
I just want to be very careful and mindful that I want to stress the importance that disassembling these buildings is also going to be a path that I don't think should be something that should be commonplace. I think that we've shown, obviously, that leads to issues that we've seen in recent project reviews, but also I've seen it's also led to, I think, unsuccessful projects that does not necessarily retain the historical quality by ripping off everything else except for the facade. I think that's very, I want to be very stressful and mindful that the project is going to return. The problem I have with some of that is that it's really asking them to come back to present a project, right? And that's outside of the demo 2 thing. But really, the only thing I see as a viable project is 2 things. Either, yes, demo everything and build a brand new project, or deal with each separate lot and build either a new construction building or renovate the existing building with additions if you want to. But in each individual, that's really the only 2 places. If you dissect these buildings and build a brand new building with all these pieces and parts, kind of attached to this new.
900 Charles.
Exactly, that's not the project that I think is making anything better and winning on both sides. It's not feasible, it's not economically viable, and it will make the project worse, right? The block worse.
So let's go back to that then. Your second point about just the building's individuality and them and someone coming back with being able to preserve. Eric, is that something that I want to tailor that to the discussion as well, because I want to see if there's a consensus with that.
In the past, haven't we technically had to vote for each individual property?
Well, this one has the addresses, of course, but to Kapal's
Just
point.
for our record, for the record, is it really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes, or is it 1 application? Because we've had this question before when we've had multiple addresses in the same project.
I mean, it's for 5 buildings. There's no reason the commission couldn't vote one way on one building and another way on another building.
That's what we did last time.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we did with the contributing and non-contributing. The request is demolish all of them. There's no reason the commission couldn't, you know, have an individual I mean, if the recommendation from the staff recommendation is the same for all the buildings, but there's no reason the commission couldn't have a staff recommendation, or sorry, a actual recommendation that is different and that is applied to specific buildings.
I guess my point is just in the, technically we have a motion on the floor, but it hasn't been seconded yet. Would be that if we go ahead and decide on a vote today, as opposed to delaying the vote for additional information, it would provide the applicant the opportunity to look at splitting up the parcels into different applications if they felt that was appropriate.
But Stacy, to your point, we'd have to vote on that. No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't have to.
No, because
Okay, gotcha.
they would come in with however they
Okay.
wanted to do it.
Okay.
They would come back with a new proposal.
Right. I would like to go ahead and second Peter's motion.
Oh, hold on one second. Hold on one second.
To agree.
Accept staff recommendation.
Agree with staff recommendation.
Let's go back in time. The recommendation on the floor.
I would like to move to accept staff's recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Do we need to go around?
Yeah, let's go.
We want to go around? Okay. I was about to do the oppose afterwards. So all in favor?
You're still in the middle.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, right the hands.
I don't understand.
And
I'm abstaining.
Yeah.
Abstain.
Only because I didn't get
Why
it.
don't go around?
Oh, did you vote?
Sorry, I said abstention.
Yeah,
I didn't say it. I thought-
hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on. Let's do this
I
again.
think that it's a problem because I'm stuck with you, right? Like,
And talk to me. What's going on?
I don't think it's about proving more numbers that are, that aren't, it's really about creating a cohesive project. And that's the tension,
Well-
right? Like, I feel like this is saying, show us more numbers. And
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's, either numbers or show us a different project. I mean, there's nothing in here saying it's only numbers. I mean, if they came back and said, let's keep 3 and raise 2, I would consider that. But I think that gets into looking at the bigger picture of how this is working together.
Right.
I don't think in this current proposal that they've adequately proven to us that it's an economic hardship and that it's a project killer to keep these 5 buildings. So I would like to deny that application. And if they want to revisit that and come back with a new plan, I would be glad to look at that. But what's here now, I would like to
Okay.
disapprove of.
Yeah, numbers are going to be crazy anyway. It's just a market right now.
That's the part I want, yeah.
And, but I do believe there is a happy medium. Right now, we're not really seeing a happy medium.
So all those who are for, raise your hands. Because we already did do we have to do it again, Eric?
Just do roll call. It'll
Oh, you'll
just
do roll call, okay.
make
cool.
everything
Thank
very
you, John.
clear.
Okay.
Nicole Battle.
You're always first. You're the bee.
I support staff's recommendation.
All right, Councilman Boyd.
Going to explain my vote. But no, I'm going to abstain. I do understand the staff's recommendation. I know I missed a significant portion of the conversations today, so for that reason, I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Dennis.
I approve of the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Good.
I approve the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Langley.
Aye.
Commissioner Leon.
I abstain.
She's not here.
Staff. Commissioner Morrow.
Aye.
Commissioner Powell.
Aye.
Commissioner Power. Commissioner Rodwell.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You forgot?
Oh, get her.
Gonna vote against it.
July
Who has already voted against it?
But here.
No,
But I had you, I already had you.
you already had me.
Yeah, he had you, Mark. Yeah. The ayes have it.
The ayes have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeas, 1 nay, 3 abstains.
Okay. Do we have any old business? Do we have any new business? This meeting is adjourned at 4:04 p.m. Have a good evening.